Hey, I'm a Superman fan. You can tell by my ability to buy things. I didn't say I was cool. Superman has been my favorite comic book character since I was a small child watching Superman 78 on VHS in the living room. My first comics ever were a stack of random old Superman issues my grandpa gave me for Christmas, and I've since read just about every mainline issue I could get my hands on, watched most of the shows, and of course there's the movies. But which movie is the best one? I don't know, but the one I watched the most as a kid was this one. I didn't say I was smart, but I want to try with this video to have some real, honest conversations with myself about these movies. I still have an attachment to a lot of these, but how well do each of them work as adaptations and just as movies? And of course, I will use this as a forum to get out all my annoying little fucking nerd takes I've been holding in for years. Superman and the Mole Men is incredibly important as not only the first feature-length theatrical Superman film, but also the first feature-length theatrical superhero film in general. And it's pretty solid. The plot revolves around this race of underground people, the aforementioned Mole Men themselves, and their attempt at making contact with the human race. In the usual human fashion, they immediately reject the Mole Men and plan to murder them. Superman himself is here to protect the Mole Men and criticize the townspeople for their bigotry. It's very champion of the oppressed Golden Age Superman stuff, and I really like it. A lot of my favorite Superman stories are based in that vibe for the character. For this rendition of The Man of Tomorrow, we get a little intro that gives a basic rundown of his origin story. I know what you're thinking. Does this mention Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy? No. Fuck my stupid fucking chud life. But this is a really solid version of Superman. George Reeves is, of course, one of the most important actors to play the role, and he's really good here. This guy is who everybody thought of when they pictured Superman prior to 1978, and it's very well deserved. He's playing Golden Age Superman to a T. Although I will say I didn't really feel much of a distinction between Clark and Superman in this. In writing or performance, it's not something that's super damning in the context of this just being a backdoor pilot to a TV show. Maybe the difference is more defined there, but I would have liked something just a little more in that regard for this movie. Speaking of Clark Kent, there is shockingly little Superman in this movie. It takes a whole 24 minutes until he dons the costume, which is pretty significant considering this thing is only 58 minutes. It's not something that bothered me a lot, but it certainly struck me as odd. Phyllis Coates is fine as Lois, she's good for what she's given, but she isn't really given a lot to do, so I don't have a strong take in her regard. Maybe she gets more to do during her time in the Adventures of Superman show that, as I previously said, this is essentially a pilot for, but I have not seen that show because I'm a fucking fraud. But I do really like the lengths Superman goes to defend the mole people on this. There's a scene where he just starts taking the townspeople's guns and it's awesome. Also, he says this.
Superman brought it to the hospital.
I don't have anything crazy to say about this, I just thought it was funny. I don't have a ton more to say about this. It's a solid first big screen outing for the character. Very much steeped in Golden Age era Superman tropes and that old time 50s television aesthetic, and it honestly made me want to watch the show. I really enjoyed it. Good stuff. And for those whom it may concern, this is just like Doctor Who and the Silurians. Yeah, that's right. I'm a Doctor Who fan too. Superman 78 is, of course, the defining Superman film. It's the one that proved the merits of superhero movies to the general audience, and its impact on Superman iconography is still felt to this day. But what do I think of it? Yeah, it's pretty good. The opening origin stuff is really great, and I specifically like this version of Krypton a lot. There's a reason a lot of Superman stuff is still riffing off what they did here aesthetically. In regards to how this movie handles Kryptonian society as a people, we don't get much information on how they operate day to day, but like any good depiction of Krypton, I can imagine them functioning as a normal people. The classic hubris of the elite is present, but I don't get the sense that Krypton is some purely awful society like some versions go for. It's always instilled such a sense of wonder in me. My childhood brain ran wild with imaginings of how Kryptonian people lived their lives on an average day, and I think that's something any version of Krypton should strive for. Once we get to Smallville, we get a sense of Clark's life. The movie does a pretty good job of quickly and efficiently establishing how lonely and alienated he feels. Clark has spent his entire childhood an outsider, never quite understanding why he's different. He's got Ma and Pa, but you can tell he wants more. And as we all know, one of them is about to fucking die. Count your lucky stars, Ma. Up until this point, they got both of your asses. Pa's death serves two purposes in this movie. One, it's the event that fully sparks that fire in Clark to go out there and discover who he is, to find his purpose. And two, it's to teach him the lesson that he can't save everyone. It's great stuff. And we get this absolutely beautiful version of the Fortress of Solitude with this crystal aesthetic that most Superman things afterwards ape off of. And I can't blame them. It is truly striking imagery. It feels unknowable and alien and regal, but also just so gorgeous. It is an absolutely beautiful piece of artistic direction. Now, to be a little bit of a bitch, I don't love that Clark spends 12 years just sitting around in the fortress. My personal preference is that prior to Metropolis, he spends a lot of time traveling the world and secretly helping people along the way, a la Birthright. But it is still obviously a pretty perfect Superman origin story, despite my little nerd bullshit. Not to mention how beautiful Smallville looks in this movie, but there's no Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, so this origin is basically irredeemable dog shit. The real meat and potatoes of this movie comes once Superman is in Metropolis and doing his Superman thing, plus backed by a workplace comedy at the Daily Planet. And Metropolis is so gorgeous in this movie. It's a fairly standard 70s city, of course, but Jeffrey Unsworth's cinematography along with the production design makes every shot of this place so radiant and alive. And of course, we have the big highlight of this movie, Lois and Clark. I'm not gonna break the mold here when I say Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder are just fucking electric in this. Their dynamic is perfect in either of Clark's identities. Christopher Reeve is endlessly charming, and of course there's the mirror scene that shows just how insanely gifted he was at switching between these two personas. But something more specific I want to highlight about Superman is how much of a little fucking stinker he is. Every time he's dealing with a crook in this, he's on some absolutely perfect Bugs Bunny bullshit. An underrepresented aspect of Superman as a character is how much he loves fucking with people. Go back to the comics from this period and he was doing it constantly there too. This movie also correctly extends it into his shenanigans as Clark, like that scene where he faints in front of Lois to catch a bullet and smirks like a little shit. Superman is a gaslighter, and he has fun with it. I also love the detail that he even claims in his interview to never tell a lie, which is in itself a lie, because Kal-El is affectionately an asshole. Superman, when he's not busy being the nicest guy on the planet, is just Bugs Bunny in circus attire. I will say though, I really wish Clark had more internal conflict in this movie. I adore all the cute shenanigans he gets up to and the beautiful little love story between him and Lois Lane, but Superman isn't really struggling with anything in this movie. The nature of this film's structure is that we're following Kal in a series of activities. It's all very a week in the life of Superman. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I do wish Superman had more to chew on as a character. The loneliness Superman inherently deals with as a Kryptonian among humans really isn't present after the origin story, and that kind of bothers me because it's his core struggle generally. It's not something he just gets over after he grows up. To go more in depth on Lois, she is absolutely perfect. No notes. Margot Kidder kills it in this role as that more tenacious and independent Lois we know and love. Plus, she's fucking hilarious. She is a part of some of the best comedic beats in the movie. Stuff like her being bad at spelling, a bit that is carried over to many versions of Lois outside of this, is a fun little quirk that gives some great texture to the character. And it's been said to death, but the I Spend a Night with Superman scene is so cute. It perfectly captures the way Superman and Lois are the only two people in the world who can really trip each other up. Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve just have so much chemistry, it's absurd. Pure movie magic. If I have one nitpick about Lois in this film, it's that I wish she was a bit more involved with the central plot. During the big final act stuff, she is there investigating about some of the land Lex bought, but I would have liked if she was more directly investigating Lex throughout the movie or something. Now I want to talk about my least favorite aspect of this movie. Lex kinda sucks in this. Gene Hackman is an incredible actor giving it his all, but this version of Lex does nothing for me. This trio of buffoons and their shenanigans just don't really work for me. I'm frankly bored for most of their screen time. The movie captures that Lex is intelligent and super egotistical, but that's kinda it. I don't feel Lex's patented personal hatred for Superman really at all. He's just a guy who believes he's the greatest criminal mind of his time and fucking loves real estate. Like he never shuts the fuck up about real estate. But oh boy, I sure wish he did. And no, I'm not saying I want the modern idea of comic book Luthor here. Obviously that didn't exist. But comic Lex wasn't like this either. He was a mad scientist who was always creating new tech bullshit to defeat Superman, and I think that would have fit well with what this movie is doing tone-wise. You don't even need to drop the businessman touches completely. I'm personally preferential to a mix of businessman and mad scientist in my Lex, but alas, real estate or whatever. Also, said real estate plan is just lame as shit. I don't care about his scheme to sell newly created beachfront property, and his motivations for taking out Superman basically boil down to, might as well. Now, if this movie really had some balls, they would have adapted the pre-crisis comic thing where Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, made Lex go bald, thus kicking off his seething hatred for him. As it stands, Lex in this movie is just kind of a lame businessman when he should have been a bald-ass mad scientist with a hate boner for Superman. My other major problem with Superman 78 is the third act. Of course, there's the fact that it shifts focus to Lex and his nonsense, which, as previously stated, I don't really like. But there's also the time travel. Now, outside of finding the context of it all lame, I do like seeing Superman going around, putting out a million little fires and helping people as the world comes apart. But that enjoyment doesn't last long when this stupid bullshit happens. And before you say anything, my problem isn't that this isn't a power Superman has or whatever. That really doesn't matter to me at all. Superman is no stranger to random bullshit go powers. I'm fine that Richard Donner decided to add in another one. My problem with the time travel is, for one, it's completely antithetical to the themes of Pa Kent's death. Everybody is always talking about how fucking great this scene is, how it's here to teach Clark the lesson that he can't save everyone, that once someone's gone, they're gone. And I really like that thematically too, but when Lois dies, the movie just decides, you know what, fuck that. You can just save someone who's dead if he fucking wants to. This could be better if there were at least consequences for his actions here, which Jor-El warns him of, but nothing bad happens as a result of this. This is all not even to mention how weird it all plays with the central conflict of this whole sequence. Superman goes back in time, seemingly undoing all the damage that was previously caused, and then finds Lois broken down, and for some reason, Jimmy is there. Jimmy then directly references Superman saving him from the dam burst, therefore, Superman didn't undo all that damage with the time travel that we just saw him undo with the time travel. The best I can think of is that when he time traveled, past him was still there to stop all those disasters, and he just went straight to Lois. But that doesn't explain how the fuck Jimmy is here. It all feels like the writing equivalent of throwing your hands in the air and saying, fuck it. And I know this is all really because Donner had a 2-movie plan that was fucked over by WB, so he placed the time travel in with this one instead of being in Superman 2 as originally intended. But I just think that it was a bad call. It all breaks my threshold for nonsense, and I have a large threshold for nonsense. And just to be clear, I'm not saying Lois should have died. I'm saying I kinda wish that whole thing wasn't in the fucking movie at all. But then we see Lex's bald-ass head, and I'm happy again. Which, of course, is followed by, like, the most iconic Superman shot ever. I do want to make it clear, for all my bitching, I still really like this movie. It means a lot to me, and it does get a lot right, but I struggle to wholeheartedly say I love it. It does absolutely deserve its flowers for how much of an achievement it is, though. It is indisputably a technical marvel of its time, and an incredibly important contribution to the Superman mythos. In 2026, it still makes me believe a man can fly. But it doesn't have Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, so who cares? I know some people are going to think this is a crazy take, but I prefer Superman 2, the Donner cut, over 1978 in almost every way. For starters, this movie is just a much tighter narrative for me. I mean, there are obvious benefits to the way Superman 1 plays fast and loose with structure, but it also leads to a lot of the problems I have with that movie, and this one just doesn't suffer there at all. The big thing I think this movie has over the first one is character work. Superman has an actual thing he's struggling with and overcomes, a character arc. It actually explores the character's loneliness and how that intertwines with this crushing weight of responsibility that he places on himself as his adopted planet's savior. Clark giving up his powers to be with Lois and be a regular person is such a smart hook for this movie. He doesn't believe he can allow himself that happiness while still feeling like an outsider. He wants to be selfish for the first time in his life, to fit in and abandon his responsibilities, because after all, doesn't he deserve to be happy after everything he's done for people? It's a perfect classic Superman conflict. The best Superman stories understand that the turmoil he feels over his identity as an adopted alien is at the core of a lot of his stories. People are always shocked when you point out that Clark is a loner. After all, he has friends at the Daily Planet and whatnot. But while the Clark Kent reporter persona exists to connect with people, it also keeps them at arm's length. He can never truly stop feeling like an outsider until he has people in his life that know every part of him. And this is where Lois Lane comes in. Lois finding out Clark and Superman are one and the same is a perfect narrative device for what this movie is dealing with for Kal as a character, and couldn't be handled better. What makes Lois and Clark's romance so special, and to me, the best comic book romance ever, if you disagree with that, I'll fucking shoot you with a gun, is their ability to bring out each other's vulnerabilities. Lois and Clark are both these people who have built up these walls to protect themselves. Clark is the first person to make Lois feel like she's safe to rely on someone. Lois is the first person to make Clark feel like he can actually let someone in, to let somebody truly know every part of himself. I'm also always preferential to Lois finding it out on her own initially, and I adore the way it just dawns on her one day in this film. She's literally just sitting at her desk looking at Clark and draws his outfit over top of Superman. It's great stuff. And I absolutely adore the way she immediately starts taking drastic actions to prove herself right, like throwing herself out of a fucking window and firing a blank at Clark. Because if there's one person Superman isn't gonna make a fool of, it's Lois Lane. On another note, I also prefer this movie's main villain quite significantly over the first one. Not only do I just think Zod is characterized better than Lex was, he also just fits really thematically well with this movie. Zod and his cronies are here to be representative of the responsibilities Superman can't abandon. As much as Clark wants to be normal, he can't abandon the human race that he loves so dearly. Zod is a physical threat that literally only he could possibly match, and he must give up the life he views as his only chance for happiness. The world needs Superman, and he needs the world. All of this is not even to mention that Terrence Stamp is very fun in this role. Great casting. I also even like Lex more in this one, because 1, he's the secondary villain, so his buffoonery takes up way less of the screen time, and 2, as a result of the first movie, his motivations are more driven by a hatred of Superman, as they should be. He does, of course, still like real estate though. Now, as much as I love all these things I've described, what this movie's doing thematically, the villains, its central conflict, I don't love how it all wraps up, and I really wish I did. Superman 1 and 2 have an ending problem. Even if I think it's marginally better here, I do really love the way Superman ultimately defeats the main villains is by outsmarting them. An underrated aspect of the character is that he has super intelligence, so I always love when a story utilizes his smarts over his brawn. Tricking the Kryptonians by pumping the red sun energy outside of the chamber is a great, clever way to resolve things. Then he throws Zod into the fucking abyss. Why did you do that, Superman? They were already all depowered. There was no reason to do any of this. It's like he just did this with pure malice in his heart. And you might say, well, he reverses it when he goes back in time. And I will talk more about that in a second. But he still did it. I'll even be generous and say that the fall didn't kill those guys somehow, and actually they ended up in some prison in the fortress or something. But he then heat visions the place down, so I really don't see any scenario where he didn't just fucking murder those guys, and for no real reason. Speaking of time travel, why was Richard Donner so into this plot device for Superman? It's, once again, kind of confusing here, because why does reversing time mean Superman doesn't have to prevent Zod from simply breaking free again? Surely the normal flow of events would just resume, and the Phantom Zone would break open again. I don't know. It's odd. Additionally, I don't like reversing Lois finding out. All that stuff I said previously that I love so much about this movie thematically in relation to Lois and Clark and their relationship is functionally erased. I don't even mind the idea of them breaking up at the end. Clark feeling like he has to for his responsibilities could have been interesting and great setup for a sequel to further develop that. Not that we would have ever gotten that sequel considering the circumstances. It's just kind of lame. I do really love this movie, to the degree that it's definitely in contention for best Superman film. But I don't understand the impulse to put all your toys back in the basket like this. It's just so narratively lame and unsatisfying, and it makes the ending not sit well with me, which really sucks because this movie is so close to being basically perfect. As it stands, it's still really great, but the ending makes it hard for me to say that unconditionally. And if you're wondering what I have to say about the theatrical cut of Superman 2 by Richard Lester, it's basically like if this movie was bad. Now, unfortunately, it's time for me to actually talk about a Richard Lester film. And you guys aren't going to believe this, but Superman's in this Richard Pryor comedy. The movie opens with Richard Pryor's character Gus trying to find a job and doing a little unfunny comedy routine. That is not to knock Richard Pryor himself, his own charm is the only thing working about this character. We then see a stupid fucking sequence of oh-so-wacky misadventures happening around Metropolis, followed by Superman surprisingly making an appearance to save someone. The whole movie goes in basically this pattern. Richard Pryor doing bits, followed by random hijinks, followed by Superman technically doing things, and all the while, I'm doing this! I'm not against silly stuff in my Superman movies. I mean, I went to great lengths to describe how much I loved those little bits in the first movie, but I am against said silly stuff being so fucking boring. I get the sense that while I'm watching these characters get up to wacky bullshit, I'm meant to be entertained. I'm not. Our main villain is suitably lame as shit, to a degree that as I write this about 2 minutes fresh off watching the movie, I don't remember his fucking name. Hey, so, editing me here. I forgot to film a clip of me saying Ross Webster. So, and as I said before, I'm not a fan of Lex in the first movie, but this is like if you took that Lex and stripped him of all his redeeming qualities. Ross Webster is a boring fucking businessman with zero bells and whistles. At least Lex had some real megalomaniac supervillain vibes going on, and a Gene Hackman performance to boot. Ross Webster is just some fucking guy. I truly get nothing from him whatsoever. Just a regular fucking dude. And Superman had plenty of villains in his rogues gallery that they could have used. Brainiac, Parasite, Bizarro, Atomic Skull, Metallo. Hell, I would have taken fucking Prankster. This is not intended as a knock to Prankster. I am his biggest fan. But this is really the start of a long trend for these movies where they think the only two Superman villains that exist are Superman and Lex Luthor. This is complete conjecture, but I'm guessing by the look of things, they probably wanted Lex Luthor in this role because apparently 2 movies wasn't enough for him. But clearly Gene Hackman wasn't interested or something along those lines, and so the most forgettable OC on the planet, Ross Webster, was born. I'd go into further detail on what makes this character tick, but he's kind of like if you distilled concrete into a person. Of course, I guess you can argue the real villain of this movie is computers. Like that's any better. You could say, though, that it harkens back to the Golden Age, when Superman was destroying a car on the first ever Action Comics cover. The champion of the oppressed facing down the threat of industrialization, fighting back against a future capitalistic hellscape on the side of the working class. Do I think that was intended or effective if it was, though? No. You could also say this movie harkens back to the time I wanted to tear my fucking hair out of my head because this movie's so goddamn boring. Now, as for what's going on with old Kal-El himself, this movie opts for a Smallville set storyline where he reunites with Lana Lang, the primary love interest of this movie. What about Lois, I hear you ask? Well, in all their genius, they write her out of the movie in the first act. I have nothing against Annette O'Toole. She's good here as Lana and even better as Ma Kent in Smallville. But consistently, the best part of these movies is Margot Kidder's Lois Lane and her dynamic with Clark. Not a single thing is gained from throwing away your core character dynamic in favor of some romance that surely not a single soul gives a shit about in the context of these movies anyway. If you are out there saying that you are in fact invested in the romance of this Clark and Lana, fucking why? The funniest part is they seemingly wanted this to be a love triangle for future movies, to which I say, go fuck yourself. Remove Lois and Clark's romance, add in a boring fucking villain, be thematically shallow, and drastically lessen the role of Superman himself. Oh, I've run out of reasons to live. And all that's not even to mention how tonally incongruent this movie is with what Richard Donner was doing. Not to beat a dead horse and say the thing everybody on the face of this planet says about the Richard Donner movies, but what works tonally about them is just how damn sincere and charming they are. There's fun and humor to be had in his films, but never does it take precedence over telling a real Superman story that takes these characters seriously. Superman 3, in contrast, doesn't give a single shit about what a Superman story is tonally. It barely is a Superman story. This is a generic, if admittedly well-crafted enough comedy with a slap of Superman paint on top. The only thing this has going for me is Gus turning Superman evil with artificial kryptonite. This movie's version of evil Superman is admittedly really funny, because he's not actually evil so much as just an antisocial dickhead. Superman's idea of being a bad guy in this movie is straightening out the Leaning Tower of Pisa, flicking nuts into alcohol glasses at a bar, and having sex. The only real laughs this comedy gets out of me are these bits. Also, of course, there's the evil Superman vs. Clark Kent fight, which is cool as imagery, but it also doesn't really go anywhere beyond that. Sure, it's metaphorically Superman trying to kill his connection to humanity, which could be an interesting thing to explore. Theoretically. But who gives a shit? Because it's not something this movie actually explores, it's just something you can sort of ascribe to this one scene. There's just nothing here. It's barely a Superman movie, so it at least has to be good at the thing it so clearly wants to be instead, but it's not even very good at that. I'm sure Richard Pryor is very capable of being funny, but he got about 2 chuckles out of me the whole damn movie. So clearly the issue is down to an unfunny script. So if you're not successful as a Superman movie, and you're not successful as a Richard Pryor comedy, what are you? Bad, but by sheer luck, it's not the worst Superman movie, even if it is the most boring one, because this one exists. Congratulations, Superman 3. You made it just under the wire. I'm never watching this again. Superman 4. You're not as boring as Superman 3. End of compliments. Now, of course, Superman 3 is a better movie. It is just far more well crafted on a technical level, and I don't think Superman 4 should even count as a movie. More so, a particularly bad PSA. But Superman 4 is at least really funny because of how bad it is, and mercifully short. So there's that. The opening titles for this are like a bad omen for the rest of the movie. Why does it look like that? It's like they're trying to imitate the style of Donner's opening credits, but with the cheapest effects you've ever seen over stock images of Earth. There are interesting ideas here. Note the emphasis on ideas. I like when a Superman story explores the concept of what should be within his power to do. It's a thing he should struggle with. He has the ability to stop a lot of the world's problems unilaterally as one man. But is it right for him to do that? It's an interesting dilemma to explore, theoretically. But unfortunately, this movie explores that concept in the most heavy-handed, lame way possible, so who really cares? As we all know, this is the anti-nuke Superman movie because Christopher Reeve was feeling passionate about that topic at the time. Now, I'm not inherently against that being explored in a Superman movie at all, but it certainly needed something else backing that narrative thread to work. The thing that is here to fill out this narrative is another fucking Lex plot, this time genetic experimentation. And I will say, hey, it's cool that Lex is doing more mad science-y type stuff in this movie, even if it doesn't really change much about his presentation. It's also cool that he actually just really wants to kill Superman in this, but I can't bring myself to care because literally only one of these 4 movies doesn't have Lex in it, and it's just discount Lex in that one. I don't understand why these movies were so terrified of using any other villains from the comics. And of course, this movie's other main villain is Lex's previously referenced genetic experiment, this stupid fucking character. Nuclear Man, the physical embodiment of the threat nuclear weapons impose, and also a clone of Superman, because people do like making those. What can I say about Nuclear Man? He technically meets the requirements to be considered a character. He's always making stupid fucking faces. Like, I'm aware I'm being very petty with this, but like, I can't think of a single shot in this movie where he looks normal. It doesn't help that he's voiced by Gene Hackman, which just always plays oddly. It sounds weird, and I'm pretty sure unless I missed something, there's no real reason for this. Lex didn't use his own DNA. He's just like that somehow. All that along with his costume looking dumb as hell, and this character just has nothing going for him in presentation. He looks stupid, he acts stupid, and his most threatening attack is nuclear scratches. I couldn't even muster up a good foundational idea out of this if I tried. They should have just used Bizarro instead. He would have actually been thematically interesting in a movie that is trying to be about Superman's place in the world. A being who thinks in literal reverse to him, serving to highlight what makes Superman valuable to Earth. Not to mention, seeing Christopher Reeve's Superman realize Bizarro is not actually evil, but simply a person who has a reverse idea of what good is, would have been really cute and an asset to this movie's themes. But no, instead, Nuclear Guy, whose main weakness is fucking shadows. This guy loses if it's fucking overcast! For some background information on me, I loved Nuclear Man as a kid, and I was obsessed with their moon fight. So congratulations, Superman 4. You reached an audience of 6-year-old me. Another intriguing idea this movie contains, but doesn't do anything interesting with, is this crystal Clark has that apparently contains the last energy of Krypton, which he eventually uses to heal himself after his first fight with Nuclear Man. There's this really good line where Lara says this ship will grow cold and silent and you will be finally alone. In a movie where Superman is grappling with trying to figure out what should be within his power to do for the planet Earth and his general place in it, it's a very intriguing idea to make him face down the concept of losing his last piece of Krypton and what that means for his identity. But it's not like this movie actually does anything good with that. It's used as little more than an out-of-nowhere plot device, and also, it doesn't even make sense to begin with. It's literally not the last piece of Krypton. The Fortress of Solitude is in this movie, and as far as I know, unaffected by use of this random ship crystal. It's indicative of this movie in general. It's lightly brushing up against themes and concepts that could serve for a great Superman story, but it does nothing with them and ultimately has nothing to say that doesn't come across shallow at best. Another example is what this movie does with the Daily Planet. It's bought by a new owner, one who wants to sensationalize the paper, uprooting the values that made the Daily Planet what it is. The concept of the newspaper that Superman himself works for falling victim to caring more about sales than journalistic ethics is a very interesting idea. And it doesn't matter because this is Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. What did you think it was gonna do? Be good? It barely scratches the surface of this narrative can of worms it's opened. Along with every other thematic device in this movie, it serves little purpose but to push the plot along and make this technically resemble a story. For another thing I hate, they can fuck all the way off with this character. Lana from the previous movie is not in this one. I'm not sure precisely why, probably something to do with it being Superman 4. But don't be mistaken, her absence from this film does not stop them from doing the annoying bullshit they were clearly intending to do after Superman 3 anyway. Once again, the strongest part of these movies, Lois and Clark's romance, gets to be sidelined by a random new love interest no one cares about. At least Lana had the excuse of being a character from the comics. Who the fuck is Lacey Warfield? I truly have no idea, but she does seem like a nice person. You know who doesn't seem like a nice person in this movie? Superman! The double date scene, where Kal has to go on a date with Lois as Superman, and with Lacey as Clark Kent at the same time! Oh, what's so fun, wacky hijinks? And gulp, how will he get away with this one? He shouldn't. I think Lois and Lacey should take turns stabbing him with kryptonite. This makes Superman come across like an asshole. For another example of Superman being a shithead in this movie, we have him revealing his identity to Lois so that she can give him a pep talk, and he can subsequently erase her memory again with his stupid fucking Superman 2 theatrical cut memory wiping kiss powers. I can't even momentarily get invested in their romance for this small sequence because frankly with the way he's treating Lois here, coupled with the two timing her and Lacey later, maybe this fucking chud should be lonely forever. This one is just me being petty, but Superman stops to fix the American flag on the moon, while Nuclear Man is just doing stuff. He's kidnapping a woman while Kal does this shit. What a fucking jackass. I think I hate Superman now. To drive a long-winded point home, the fact this movie was made on a budget of $2 and a dream obviously affects it very heavily. But I also think the problems are foundational enough that a proper budget wouldn't have saved it. Not a single part of this movie works to me. There's interesting ideas here and there, and I can feel that this film is giving an honest effort to be more in line with Donner's work than 3, but it's endlessly shallow and lame. Its only redeeming quality in the end is that it's hilarious in its failings. Superman Returns is aggressively okay. I used to really like this movie, but it really didn't work for me this time around. Now, I don't think the idea of a Donnerverse pseudo-sequel to Superman 2 is a bad idea inherently, although it is certainly a way to creatively limit yourself for no real reason. It doesn't feel like an asset to this movie. It is so transparently trying to retread Superman 1 in a way that hinders its ability to feel special, while not even capturing the spirit of it all that well anyway. And what few elements are original to this movie are not that great either. Superman 1 is a movie that knows when to take its time to breathe. Superman Returns certainly took this lesson to heart, excessively. To be clear, I'm not remotely against a slow pace. One of my favorite movies of all time is a 4-hour-long slow burn character drama. But this movie doesn't feel like a slow burn so much as just slow. Not nearly enough is happening scene to scene to justify how much it's taking its sweet old time. And it all just kinda coalesces in a movie that feels dull. There's cool stuff here and there, like obviously the plane scene that literally everyone says is awesome is indeed awesome, and I enjoy the couple random instances of Superman helping people, but I gotta imagine cutting like 20 to 30 minutes of this movie would really help it, although I think the movie has pretty fundamental problems that a better edit couldn't save. For a movie that's so heavily aping off Donner's work, I'm not sure why they decided taking the charming qualities of that movie was a step too far. You can very much tell a more downer Superman story. It's been done well in the comics plenty of times. But this movie's version of that is just having a total lack of energy. And this guy is supposed to be the same Superman as Christopher Reeve. Sure doesn't feel like it. To be clear before I yap, Brandon Routh is not the problem. He was perfect casting then and has only proved that more since. But he isn't given shit to work with here. I don't have any problem with Superman being more somber at times. As I've said in this video repeatedly, I think he is intrinsically a pretty lonely character, and I love when that's highlighted. But this movie's version of that is Kal coming across like a stoic weirdo who's never talked to a person before. I don't blame Brandon Routh for this at all. It feels like he's actively straining against bad direction in this. Like, for every scene as Superman, he was trying his damn best to be charming, but Bryan Singer, who is a disgusting piece of shit by the way, just continuously told him to knock that shit off. In contrast, he's better in that regard in the Clark Kent persona, which makes me think Singer thought Superman is supposed to only have fun as Clark, which doesn't make any sense, because once again, the basis for this version of Kal is this guy. It makes me wonder how much they even remember from the Reeves movies, because he wasn't like this. He was endlessly charming, personable, and even funny a lot of the time. And I know for a fact that Brandon Routh is capable of all those things. The fucking CW got that out of him! So it just sucks that he's so restrained for his only solo appearance as the character. On a positive note, there's a scene where he's standing on the Kent farm and remembers his time as a boy. Maybe even a Superboy. The adventures of Superman when he was a boy, you might say. Obviously, it's not really Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, though. Fuck my Chungus life. Anyway, why did they make him a deadbeat dad? Not really a thing I view as a huge criticism, because obviously he didn't do it intentionally, but it's just kind of an odd choice, and emblematic of the strange vision this movie has for Superman in general. In regards to his being a dad, though, I do have a random thought to get out that I think about every time I watch this movie. What the fuck is going through Lois's head when she finds out Superman is the father of her kid? Because theoretically, since this movie is in canon with the theatrical cut of Superman 2, Lois shouldn't remember having sex. Unless Superman's memory-wiping kiss powers specifically let her remember the sex. Now sure, it exists in a more nebulous quasi-canon place with the rest of those movies, but you can still assume the basic events of Superman 2 still happened, and then Superman left Earth shortly after. So I'll just go with his memory-wiping kiss powers, specifically letting her remember the sex, I guess. Thank you for your time. Speaking of Lois, she's in this movie too. I don't care for this movie's version of Lois. I'm sorry to keep harping on about the Donner movies, but this movie kind of invites that. And Kate Bosworth's Lois doesn't feel like Margot Kidder's at all, nor do I think she really functions all that well as her own version of Lois. Hard to say if, like with Routh, that comes down more to direction than performance, because unlike him, we don't really have an example of her playing this character in any other context, but considering the general lack of energy in everybody in this movie, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that it is a factor for her as well. I don't know. Regardless, she's way too subdued in this movie. There's brief, fleeting moments where she does or says a vaguely Lois Lane-like thing, but most of the time she comes across fairly generic and bland. And considering how goddamn funny and energetic Margot Kidder is as Lois in the older movies, I would think they'd try to imbue her successor with some of that, but they just kinda don't. The degree in which this movie just lacks energy in general is so strange. No one is allowed to have a wide range of emotions or texture as a character except, like, Lex, sort of. This is also the third Superman movie in a row to feel the need to add some bizarre obstacle to Lois and Clark's romance. This is also James Marsden's second time being cucked by a superhero, and he doesn't even get the benefit of having awesome fucking optic blasts in this one. Why is he here? I don't care about him. No one cares about him. The only reason this guy's existence is even noteworthy at all is that he's played by Cyclops. It's just another way to shove Lois and Clark in a love triangle for once again, the third goddamn time in a row. Except I don't even think this movie's heart is in it. I can't imagine anywhere good this whole dynamic could have gone in sequels. Just an odd choice. Kevin Spacey, who is a disgusting piece of shit, by the way, is, fine in this movie, I guess. He's not really doing anything special, but he's serviceable enough. He feels a solid amount like Lex. He's got a huge ego, he seems pretty spiteful and jealous of Superman, he's into real estate. Who snuck that last part in? Apparently, Lex's obsession with real estate was more important to carry over from the Donner films than Superman's personality. I'm sorry, it's like kinda funny as a gag that he's into real estate, but it's just lame as an actual thing that matters in these movies. I can't believe we spent decades letting this be the default Lex archetype. He's basically just playing Gene Hackman's Lex with ever so slightly more of his temperament from the comics. He's also sort of more mad scientist-y, I suppose, which is good, but I'm not giving him that many points for stealing crystals and being told what they do by a Jor-El hologram. But I do like when he beats the absolute shit out of Superman in the third act and fucking stabs him. There's such a real sense of hatred coming from this guy here, and it's really brutal. As a kid, I was genuinely concerned I was watching Superman fucking die. Then after all that, Superman has to get right the fuck back up and lift a landmass filled with kryptonite to the sky. And then he plummets to the ground and ends up in a coma for days. Superman gets fucked up in this movie, Jesus Christ. Anyway, in conclusion, yeah. It's a Superman movie. I don't find it offensively bad, there's some good stuff here, but most of it was done better in the Donner movies anyway, so who cares? It doesn't get to stand on its own 2 feet as a rendition of Superman, and it doesn't even really capture the version of Superman that's trying to imitate all that well. So I just don't really get anything from this movie anymore. Now here comes the part of the video where I please no one because I both like Man of Steel too much for the people who hate these movies and probably not enough for the Snyder fans, but I'm sure it'll be fine because everyone is super normal about this movie. I've definitely had a weird relationship with Man of Steel. Just about any opinion you can think of for this movie, I had it at one point. But I think I've settled into a spot with it. I have a lot of attachment to it as the first Superman movie I could really be sentient enough to be excited for as a kid, and I still enjoy it, but it's not without its flaws. To start, let's talk about this movie's version of Krypton. It's a mixed bag. There is very clear John Byrne influence here with its portrayal of Kryptonian society. It's very much leaning more into a dystopian view of the planet that I don't love. I'm of course not at all against there being something flawed in Kryptonian society that led to their downfall, but when you lean into it too hard, I start to have a problem because it needs to be a place Kal yearns for and wants to honor. Making the planet predominantly bad gives Superman an easy out for his struggles with identity, which just isn't interesting to me. Now, on a positive note, Man of Steel's terrific versions of Jor-El and Lara help in this area. They show that at least in this version of Krypton, the planet is not just purely filled with sterile cold people and is capable of good, but also the fact Kryptonians haven't given birth naturally in 100 years or whatever is leaning a little too much into Byrneisms for me. But at least Kal wasn't born on fucking Earth in this. As for Superman Clark Kent Kal-El himself, he's solid enough. I really like that this version of Clark did a lot of wandering around the planet in between leaving Smallville and becoming Superman, helping people along the way. Still no Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, though. I've always loved when he has a lonely wanderer phase, and intercutting this section with his childhood is a neat choice. The way it bounces between him drifting alone in the water with the first time he got X-ray vision, reflecting on probably one of the most specifically lonely moments of his life. He's drifting, looking for something to give his life purpose, and as the flashback shows Ma can't comfort him, he wakes up in the water, ready to keep searching for that purpose. It's great stuff. Now I know what you're thinking. What do you think about Pa Kent in this? I dunno. Okay, so I get what this movie is going for with this portrayal of Pa, and I do think it's close to working. I don't mind the idea of a Pa Kent that isn't a perfect old wise man. Plenty of versions of Jonathan make him a more flawed person, and it's worked. When you give Pa Kent flaws, typically what that looks like is making him overprotective, maybe even specifically reluctant to share his son with the world. And that's clearly what this movie is going for, but it's just ever so off. I think what Pa Kent says after the bus crash is not intended to literally mean he thinks Clark should have let them die, but instead that he genuinely just doesn't know exactly what the answers are. He's just scared and reacting emotionally to the threat of losing his son, to the threat of having him face a world that might reject him. In Superman fashion, it's real, grounded human problems on a cosmic scale, but the scene doesn't do a great job of conveying all that. As for the Pa Kent death scene that everyone clowns on, I think in a vacuum it doesn't work. As does the scene where Clark says "you're not my real father" to him in the car not work in a vacuum. But with the way those moments are paired, Jonathan's death becomes about Clark choosing in that moment to trust his father. Now, does that mean I think all these things work? I mean, I think there's a lot of good concepts here, but it definitely could have been executed far better. Not that this is an original thought remotely, but I obviously adore the first flight scene. I love how much weight Kal's Kryptonian heritage is given here. I generally personally prefer when Clark learns about it all much earlier than this, but I think Man of Steel does something very interesting with him learning later in life. Clark has spent his entire adulthood up to this point drifting through the world, searching for a purpose. He knows he's an alien, but nothing beyond that. So when he finds the Kryptonian spacecraft and learns of his heritage, it's like he's finally getting the missing pieces of who he is. It's Superman becoming a whole person for the first time, and as he flies through the sky in the most joyous moment of the movie, he's finally found his purpose. His life finally makes sense. It's really powerful stuff to me, even if it doesn't fit my personal little bitch nerd ideals for the context of how he finds out. Now, as far as the guy playing Superman during all this, Henry Cavill mostly works here. Clark is more restrained in this than I would typically prefer, but it does work for the specific context of this story. And I could very easily imagine this version of Clark going on to be more charismatic down the line as he opens up more. But of course, you know, Henry Cavill just isn't very charismatic. But by way of a happy accident, he's mostly solid here specifically. Except in regards to his relationship with Lois, which is kind of important. I've said a lot about Superman, but what about the Superman story Deuteragonist? My favorite superhero supporting character, the woman that completes Superman as a person and makes way for the best romance in comics. I mean, she's okay in this. There's just something off about Lois in Man of Steel. On paper, she talks like Lois, she does very Lois-like things, but she never really feels like Lois to me. Amy Adams is of course an incredible actress, so maybe it comes more down to direction than her, but I just never really buy her as this character. There's various moments in the movie where she's saying an extremely Lois thing, but Amy Adams' delivery never coalesces with said dialogue in a way that works for me. She comes across pretty stilted a lot of the time, or just too soft. I don't feel that patented Lois Lane ferociousness from her, but once again, hard to say if that's purely a performance issue or a directing one. I know for sure at least that fault does not fall on her for her total lack of chemistry with Superman. He wasn't exactly giving her much to work with. Lois and Clark's romance here is unfortunately kinda stilted. They're not awful together, but they're certainly not great either. They're just right on the line to be okay enough for me to tolerate them, but not good enough for me to be invested in them for any other reason than they happen to be Lois and Clark. And you don't get credit for that. That part comes free with being a Superman story. Now, once again, I don't blame Amy Adams for this. It definitely mostly comes down to Henry Cavill never really doing anything with his performance, ever. Let's talk about Zod. Michael Shannon is doing the fucking most, man. He is by far and away the best element of this movie. Every goddamn scene with Zod in this movie, he's acting his ass off. Truly incredible stuff. I think Michael Shannon's Zod genuinely deserves to be in conversation for one of the best comic book movie villains. He's pretty pitch perfect Zod, a military man zealously dedicated to the protection of Krypton to the point that he'll step over anyone to do it, and the tragedy of this character who literally exists for no other purpose than his home planet's continued prosperity is handled really great here. When he realizes he's lost any chance of restoring Krypton, Michael Shannon delivers such an amazing performance it's genuinely kinda heartbreaking, even though you just watched this man commit 15 9/11s. Speaking of losing the chance to restore Krypton, Clark should care about that more. Obviously, I don't have a problem with Superman stopping them from restoring Krypton. In no world would he let them do that at the expense of humans, but he should be way more broken up about it. The dichotomy of the way this movie treats his Kryptonian heritage is very strange, because it definitely clearly thinks of it as a very important thing that means a lot to him, but also like sacrificing parts of that heritage doesn't really faze him. This shouldn't just be a tragedy to Zod, it should be a tragedy to Kal as well. The Kryptonian scout ship that serves as this movie's version of the Fortress of Solitude, the place Superman learned of his heritage and finally gained his purpose in life from. It's majorly damaged during all this, and I wish Clark was more bothered by that. Instead, we have Zod pouring his guts out while Henry Cavill just kinda stares at him. Speaking of Superman and Zod, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not lingering on this long because holy shit, people have been arguing about this scene for 13 years. And frankly, I'm over the discussion. That being said, what do I think of it? I mean, I don't like it. I think that yes, this is a hyper-specific context in which I believe Kal could be forced into killing. But obviously, this is a movie. Yup, not food. A writer wrote it like this for a reason, and if I had my choice, it simply would have been written to go down a different way. Also, if you have to commit to him killing Zod, BVS should have had him mentally suffering way more because of that. It shouldn't be a thing Superman gets over basically ever. Anyway, I still mostly like Man of Steel. It is not my ideal in a lot of ways, but there's still a lot of stuff I love here, and a lot of stuff I don't. I completely understand why this doesn't work for a lot of people, but it mostly swings in a positive direction for me. Feel free to scream at me in the comments for whichever direction you may lie on this one. James Gunn's Superman is a bit of a mixed bag. It's a movie I really love watching. Every time I throw it on, it's like all my problems with it disappear, but they're hard to ignore as soon as the movie's over and I have time to think about it all. It's an extremely fun watch, and I am personally a big fan of what James Gunn and his DP Henry Bram are doing visually here. I'm also a big fan of the week in the life of Superman structure that this film takes on, for which they should have included the title cards. But it also just takes a lot of big adaptational swings that don't sit well with me. To start with the obvious, David Cornsweet is incredible as Superman. He is in strong contention for my favorite Superman casting we've ever had. He's so effortlessly charming, funny, and just perfect for this role. And on a writing level, I think this movie does a great job with those parts of the character. This is the most personable and comforting Superman has felt since Reeve. I do, however, think it's less strong in regards to Kal's struggles as a character. This movie doesn't really seem interested in Clark's interior loneliness. We start with Lois already knowing his identity, which leads to some good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it also means we get none of the secret identity drama. Additionally, he has his Justice Gang friends who all know who he is, and I don't really like how open book we're immediately starting this Superman at. It does have something to say about his struggle with identity, but I don't really like what it has to say in that regard, so... How this movie handles his Kryptonian heritage is of course the biggest topic of debate for this. Damn near every soul on the planet has given their 2 cents on this issue, so allow me to add to the pile. I don't like it. I see what this movie is doing, and I don't dislike the goal of this narrative element, but I heavily dislike the way we get there. It's a way to make Superman's choices to do good and be good all his own. It wasn't his destiny to be a hero, it's who he chose to be because that's just who he is. That's all well and good, but how this movie goes about accomplishing this theme is misguided at best, genuinely problematic at worst. The L's being evil just sucks. One of Superman's core struggles is, as I've said multiple times in this video, the pull between his 2 identities, as a Kryptonian immigrant, the last son of his people, and his identity as the adopted Kansas boy. My personal opinion is that both are incredibly important for who he is, and this movie just tries to pick one and give a definitive answer. And that answer sucks. The L's being evil gives Superman an out. He no longer really has to grapple with his crisis of identity past this story. Not to mention, beyond removing a lot of narrative potential, this twist just has weird implications with the way it's handled. Clark learns his birth parents are evil, gives a speech about how human he is, and ends the movie watching footage of his perfect Earth parents because the footage of his Kryptonian parents is forever tainted. This makes Superman 2025's version of the immigrant allegory really fucking weird. Kal is now this child who was saved from the upbringing of evil alien parents by perfect American farmers. It does not read well at all. Now, I know what every single one of you are thinking. Do you, Jean Jacket, think that Superboy, The Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, is a part of this Superman's origin story? Well, I don't think James Gunn knows what that is. This world is so fucked up. To switch gears, I do really like that this movie kicks off by Superman stopping a tyrannical regime from attacking a more vulnerable nation. It's very champion of the oppressed stuff. And the detail that he put the Baravian president on a cactus is awesome. I love when Superman stories acknowledge that he can have edge when he's angry. I do wish we actually got to see any of this, though. It would have at least been nice if Superman had shown up in Jarhanpur during the third act invasion. And if you're about to say that he was busy during all of that, just a reminder that this is also a movie. Yep, not food either. For another round of oh my god, this movie's casting director deserves a raise, Rachel Brosnahan is just as incredible for Lois as Corn Sweat is for Superman. Slap them together and we have the best Lois and Clark we've had in these movies since Reeve and Kidder. The only complaint I can muster up with Lois in this movie is I wanted more of her. She's perfect. So here I have the more Lois Lane plan. So here we have characters who are Lois. Obviously, Lois. Characters who are not Lois. And we're going to go down this list and decide who we can remove. So, remove the Engineer, her movie isn't even coming out. Remove Ultraman, he's dead. Remove Metamorpho, who cares? Remove Jimmy Olsen, he's a chud. Add in more Eve Tessmacher. Add in more Lex. Remove Mom Pa Kent, just kill him again. Remove the whole Justice Gang. And remove Superman. This movie does a great job of highlighting the way Lois Lane is Kal-El's greatest foil. No one can knock him off kilter the way that she can. The interview scene remains my favorite scene in the whole movie. Obviously, in the scene, Clark is ultimately right. People were going to die and there was just no world where he wasn't going to do something about it. But Lois has him tripping all over himself because she is the greatest rage baiter in the world. I also love how it shows that Clark can be quite hot-headed at times in a way I don't think is always acknowledged. The whole scene is just a great way to efficiently establish their dynamic. Also just a big fan of the general arc of their relationship in this movie. Lois has a natural inclination to question everything, even him subconsciously. Can he really be as innately good as he seems to be? Of course, the answer is yes, and I think she fully realizes that in the scene at the farm, looking around his childhood bedroom. She gets to see firsthand some of the little pieces of what made Cal the man he is today, and it makes him make sense. That final kiss between them where she finally says I love you back is the resolution to all that. She no longer feels a need to question Clark or their ability to work together. She accepts him at face value. It's great stuff, and my favorite romance we've had in a comic book movie in a long time. Now, to talk about what is easily the strongest element of this movie, oh my god, Nicholas Hoult Lex is the best modern comic book villain. He is just perfect. I went over my ideal Lex earlier in this video, and it's genuinely insane how he checks each and every one of my boxes. He is the perfect balance of businessman and mad scientist. We got a movie Lex that gets to use his resources as an evil billionaire and as a psychotic scientist doing experiments to kill Superman. He's egotistical, he thinks he knows what's right for the planet in a way that makes him an envious monster, and he fucking hates Superman. Like, strong contender for biggest hater villain in a superhero movie, this motherfucker hates him so much he cries about it. Not to mention how generally petty he is all the time. Like in that moment where he throws the cup on the ground, orders his employees to pick it up, and then drops it again. He's such an evil little shithead, I love it. Then his speech about envy is so perfectly Lex. Yeah, Lex is a guy who would hate the idea of Einstein or Galileo being mentioned in the same breath as him. That's so fucking good as a character detail. I also adore the little subversion this movie does by making you think for a moment that they're doing the Gene Hackman real estate thing, that he's doing all this to get richer and become king of Jarhanpur or whatever. But no, he's doing it all simply as an excuse to fucking kill Superman, and it's so good. And Nicholas Hoult just doesn't miss a goddamn beat. He is so astronomically perfect in this role, it's insane. It is very close between him and Michael Rosenbaum, but I do think I can confidently say this movie has my favorite Lex Luthor adaptation. Let's talk about the wider DCU and how it influences this movie. I talked about it a little bit in my last video, but I want to get a little more specific here. Before I say anything else, let me say that I do really enjoy the Justice Gang as characters. Guy Gardner is hilarious, Hawkgirl is fun for the bit she's here, and Mr. Terrific is obviously awesome. He specifically is a highlight of the movie. All that being said, I'd remove them given the choice. Don't get me wrong, the movie balances these characters with the main Superman stuff as well as it can, but I don't want it to have to balance all that in the first place. The Daily Planet stuff really suffers under the weight of how much this movie has to do. We barely get to see Corn Sweat doing the Clark Kent reporter persona, which is really unfortunate because he's killing it for the little bit that is here. This movie uses the hypno glasses, and the thing about it is it didn't need that at all. This is maybe the most believable Clark Kent and Superman have been as two different people in a long time. I wish we got more of that, as well as more of the Daily Planet crew themselves. I want Clark and Steve Lombard's prank war. I want Perry White being a father figure to Lois. I want all the super interesting stuff there is with Cat Grant. I want Ron Troop being this regular person with the convictions of Superman. I want Jimmy Olsen to not be like that. I'm glad we finally have a Superman movie where Jimmy matters at all, but the monkey's paw curl is that he doesn't really act like Jimmy at all. This movie is super dedicated to the joke of Jimmy being a ladies' man, which I don't mind in and of itself, but what I do mind is that he's an asshole. This is not my Heart of Gold adventurer Jimmy Olsen, this is a douchebag. And I just wish we had more time for all of this. The Justice Gang stuff is fun, like I said, but I don't think it's worth sidelining Superman's supporting cast. It just kinda makes me wish we were getting a completely self-contained trilogy of Superman movies in the way Batman's getting right now. Maybe the sequels will do better in this regard. I hope that they do better in this regard. But with James Gunn having to make these Superman movies so central to a cinematic universe, I'm not holding my breath. All in all, I do really like this movie, and I see myself rewatching it a lot in the future because it's just a really fun time. But there's just way too much that bothers me to say I wholeheartedly love it, unfortunately. The elves being evil and what this movie does with that twist is also just such a fundamental problem with this rendition of the character for me. And I don't think any sequels can really fix the damage it caused. But I suppose we'll see. I am happy for the new generation of kids who get to say Superman is their favorite character in the playground without getting weird looks, though. So, now that I've talked about every solo theatrical Superman movie, what's the answer to my question? What's the best one? None of them! They all suck, and I hate them! Donner cut of Superman 2. It's the Donner cut of Superman 2. It is absolutely the closest to my ideal Superman film. Not just in terms of adaptation, but also just being a movie. It's not without its caveats, but none of these are. My ideal Superman movie doesn't really exist yet. Maybe we'll get it one day, but I'm not gonna hold my breath for some director to happen to have the same exact interpretation of this character as me. Obviously, I want my perfect Superman movie with zero caveats, but is that very likely to happen? Obviously not. It's just not a very realistic desire to have. I'm never gonna have a Superman movie with Superboy, the adventures of Superman when he was a boy, until I take matters into my own hands. Superman's my favorite comic book character, and thus I have a very hyper-specific version of him that exists in my head. But it's cool to see the hyper-specific version other people have in their head. Even if it doesn't always work for me, he's a character that's always gonna shift and change over time. And that's okay.